Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sit properly. Well, I guess everyone has their own idea of what sitting properly means. Well, that's one thing they didn't teach you in the Bhakti Sastri class. How to sit properly. Sitting like this is not sitting properly. Congratulations to all of you on completing the Bhakti Sastri course. I believe they're all graduating from that. Especially to study here in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Dham of Mayapur is a great fortune, and I trust that you are all appreciating this great opportunity and that you know more than you did before you started this course. One of the most important things that we have to know in Krishna consciousness is that it's not what you know per se that matters. Of course, knowledge is essential. We have to know what is the goal of life and how to attain it. Without that knowledge, there's no question of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is very different from the spiritual notion of mere consciousness. The idea that spiritual perfection is only chinmay, means there's only consciousness and nothing else. That is the impersonal idea. Krishna consciousness means to be conscious of Krishna, understanding Him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which means to understand His energies and the nature of His pastimes. As Krishna Himself states in Bhagavad Gita, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvang prabhatate iti matva bhajante maam buddha bhava samanditaha. Those, Krishna says, I am the origin of everything. Everything emanates from me. Iti matva, understanding this, considering this, persons worship me with their intelligence, applying their intelligence and with feeling. So knowledge of Krishna is essential. There's no Krishna consciousness without it. And especially we need to understand reality through Shastra so as to be able to distinguish reality from non-reality or illusion. However, knowing simply to know is not enough. It is quite possible to study the whole Bhakti Shastri course and not make any advancement in Krishna consciousness by doing so. Srila Prabhupada writes in his preface to the Nectar of Instruction, advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So that one should be a follower, that is a precondition for making any advancement in Krishna consciousness. We make advancement in Krishna consciousness not by pushing ourselves up, but from lifting our arms up and agreeing to be pulled up. If one approaches Krishna consciousness in a skeptical attitude, as mundane academics may do so, then one will simply look for faults. If one is predisposed not to be Krishna conscious, then he's not very likely to become Krishna conscious, as is stated by Prahlad Maharaj. What's the verse in this regard? Anyone know? Anyone? Natyena Krishna. Yeah, you know the verse, but then you should know how to apply it also. Natyena Krishna paratah svato va mitho bibhadyeta griha vratanam adanta gobhya vishatang tamisram punah punascharvita charvananam. So persons who are against the very enterprise of becoming Krishna conscious, they're determined not to become Krishna conscious. They won't become Krishna conscious. Even if they make efforts at spiritual advancement or self-realization, if they are from the outset inimical to Krishna consciousness, then they won't make advancement in Krishna consciousness. They may say, I'm looking for the truth, but they already rejected in their minds the idea that the truth can be a person. So, Matena Krishna Paratasvatova, they may discuss with others about Krishna consciousness, but they're determined not to become Krishna. And for all their pretensions to spirituality, they're actually gross materialists. And so they end up just, for all their pretensions to spirituality, they just end up enjoying the senses, or attempting to enjoy the senses like any other materialist. And they enter into hell. Now, almost certainly none of you are in that category. You have not come here to study Krishna consciousness with the aim of denigrating it as some rascals do. But citing this verse is by showing an extreme example, showing how our approach to Krishna consciousness is essential in how much we actually become Krishna conscious. Faith has to be there. It may not be that if we don't have faith in Shastra, then if we study Shastra, then we retain a critical attitude toward it. Or we might maintain a position that, well, I have faith in Shastra, but I don't really... There are many ways in which people, they may suppose themselves to have faith in Shastra, but it's a modified or not full faith. So to actually be benefited from studying Shastra, Srila Prabhupada's books, we should approach with an attitude of faith. Sarva metadritang manye yanmang vadasi keshava. Srila Prabhupada quotes this in his introduction to Bhagavad Gita as it is. It is a verse from Bhagavad Gita in which Arjuna states to Krishna that, O Keshava, O Krishna, I accept as truth everything that you say. Srila Prabhupada cites this as a condition for understanding Bhagavad Gita. If we have faith, then we can understand. There is an artificial and unnecessary dichotomy created by foolish materialistic philosophers. It means a two-ness, duality. A two-ness in which the two elements are opposed. An unnatural and artificial division between faith and knowledge. They say that, well, all this scripture, that's just faith, but we have science, which is knowledge. But faith is required to attain any knowledge. One has to have the faith that the teacher knows the subject. The teacher is the subject is important. I will be benefited. Let's go step by step. We should have faith that what is being taught is true. That the teacher is competent to teach the subject, and that I will be benefited by studying this. That's true in any subject. If one goes to a college to study engineering, for instance, if the student just mocks the teacher and said, what's this nonsense you're talking? Obviously, he can never understand the subject. So, faith is required. In Vedic culture, faith is stressed, but knowledge is stressed also. Both in Semitic or Abrahamic religions, great emphasis is given on faith. You just have to believe it. But in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he stresses that I am teaching you knowledge. Jnanam teham savijnanam idam vakshyamya sheshataha yajgyatva neha bhuyo nyajgyatavyam avasishyate. He tells Arjuna that I will now teach you a knowledge and realized knowledge, jnana vijnana. I will teach you that in full. By knowing this, there will remain nothing unknown. Krishna stresses that faith is possible, faith is required, to attain knowledge. It's not that one is simply on the platform of faith and that's the beginning and the end of one's whole religious commitment. Faith is required to, and then one can get knowledge. Now, what is the nature of this knowledge? As I said, an envious and doubting person, they can study Srila Prabhupada's books, and they could learn what is the subject matter. But that learning, that is simply to know in the manner that one can repeat it and pass one's examination. That is not the kind of knowledge that Krishna gives to Arjuna. Knowledge means realization. A person who can pass a Bhakti Shastra exam, but who does not live and act in Krishna consciousness, has not actually understood anything. Traditionally, Vedic knowledge, and especially the directly spiritual portions, this was taught only to Brahmanas and to Kshatriyas. There was no question of teaching it to either to people who did not adhere to dharma, nor to those who by their character were not situated in the higher levels of dharma. It was one should not accept as a disciple a person who is not of good character. That person should be able to follow the principles of spiritual life, committed to follow the principles of spiritual life, which it's more than no meat eating, no gambling, illicit sex, or intoxication. One's whole character should reflect one's commitment to spiritual understanding. This means that one will not be very lusty or greedy or exploitive. There must be good character. The heart must be pure for that knowledge to translate into realization. So the basic attitude of a devotee is that of Sharanagati. The commitment to surrender to Krishna. Without that commitment, then one will remain on the mental platform. One may study Shastra, but actually one is unfit to do so. One has to approach the Shastra as a disciple. Shastric knowledge is a gift that is awarded to the worthy disciple. That is now available in books. That knowledge is available in books. So he may think, okay, I'll get the books and I'll study, and in this way I'll become knowledgeable. But that is the attitude of a thief or a usurper. This knowledge is to be received through parampara. It is received as a gift. By one's own intellectual prowess, one cannot gobble up this knowledge and make it one's own property. The process of acquiring knowledge in the Vedic culture is that of anugatya, of following. The following of a disciple means complete commitment. It's very, very different from the modern classrooms in schools and colleges. the whole ethos is different in almost every way. The classroom approach to imparting knowledge is not at all conducive for Krishna consciousness. So traditionally, candidates for Shastric study, they are selected. It is not that anyone just by signing up and giving a certain fee, they can be accepted as a student. The students are selected on the basis of their sincerity and also on the basis of their intellectual capacity. One can be very sincere in Krishna consciousness, but of very limited intellectual capacity. So to understand all the details of Krishna consciousness from Shastra requires also the gift of intellectual ability. One can be fully Krishna conscious without that intellectual ability. But if a devotee is to be trained as a brahmana, as a teacher and a preacher, then there has to be some intellectual capacity, some higher intellectual capacity. So whether one has actually benefited from this course, it cannot be measured simply in terms of the marks that you get after writing the examination. One's actual advancement in Krishna consciousness is the aim of this course. And that will be seen after the completion of during the process and after the completion of the course. One should, after taking this course, one should not only be theoretically knowledgeable in the topics in Srila Prabhupada's books. One should be fully convinced, should be enlivened and inspired, and want to practice Krishna consciousness with tremendous application, and should want to share that with others. So these are all signs that one has actually imbibed the knowledge. A lot depends. Well, one thing is the predisposition of the student. One major factor is the predisposition of the student. And another major factor is the attitude of the teacher or teachers. Teachers who are themselves in a mood of wanting to fully surrender to Krishna, to progress in Krishna consciousness, they will naturally impart that to the students. Conversely, if the teacher is not in that mood, if the teacher is contaminated or does not have full faith in Krishna and Shastra, then that will be communicated also to the students. So we will see how the students have actually benefited, so that their experience at during this course of study can be maximized. It is a very good idea before undertaking the course to undertake a course in surrender to Krishna, and to go on with that attitude, of course, during the course, so that by studying Srila Prabhupada's books, that reinforces one's attitude of surrender. Therefore, I recommend before taking this course, one should have some good background in Krishna consciousness, of service and surrender. Distributing books, washing pots, cleaning the floor, all these heart purifying activities are necessary. Someone who enters the Bhakti Shastri course with the eagerness to let me try to understand more about this process which I've dedicated my very being to, such a devotee can best benefit from taking this course. Of course, someone may come with the attitude, well, anyway, let me try to find out more. No, I said that someone else may come not with that attitude of let me surrender more, but they're not fully convinced of Krishna consciousness. So devotees in that frame of mind, if the teachers themselves are fully convinced, then they can convince those who are somewhat inclined to Krishna consciousness but somewhat doubtful also. The effect of the Bhakti Shastri course should be that those who take it, when they're finished, they're ready to burst out and preach Krishna consciousness everywhere. It is not merely book knowledge. It is meant for propagating to the world. For that purpose, we shall have to go on reading Srila Prabhupada's books. It's not that, well, okay, I passed my Bhakti Shastri examination, now I don't need to study anymore. But rather, we have to go on studying Srila. This course should give us a taste for studying Srila Prabhupada's books, which we should then continue throughout our life. Something that Srila Prabhupada recommended, and that all previous acharyas have recommended, I mean, it's a natural part of Shastric study, is to learn shlokas, which helps to encapsulate the knowledge within our minds. And if we have a stock of shlokas, then that can remind us in all situations of what is the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and how to apply it in various situations. So shlokas are very useful for preaching Krishna consciousness, especially in India. Although Srila Prabhupada didn't quote shlokas any less than when he was in the West. He might, for instance, be answering an interview of a journalist, and in the middle he would quote some shloka, even though the journalist wouldn't have the faintest idea what the shloka meant. But by quoting that verse, it demonstrates that we are taking knowledge from an established authority. We are not simply making it up. So those are a few thoughts on the Bhakti Shastri course. Hare Krishna. The mind. So asking something about the mind, mental platform? No.
Now, after taking the Bhakti Shastri course, we realize how much and how many impurities we have in our heart. So, what to do to not feel discouraged by all those impurities, but actually continue and going on?
Then you have to study Shastra. By studying Shastra, if we understand how many impurities are in our heart, we can also understand from Shastra how to become free of those impurities. Shastra not only reveals the impurity within our heart, but also reveals the process to become free from that.
So why does it take so long to actually purify ourselves?
We don't want. We're rascals. Don't blame Krishna. I'm doing my best, but still all these bad things are in my heart. It's all Krishna's fault. We are holding on to our impurity. Don't blame Krishna. You give him the mic there. You can give this one. Whatever's convenient.
В процессе изучения обнаружилась такая проблема. Студенты.
So, during this Russian Bhakti Shastri course, we found one issue that we were one issue came up.
Issue.
That most of us had our own Russian edition Srila Prabhupada books, but they were of different editions. It means there were some editorial corrections, etc. At the same time, our teachers were mainly basing their teachings on original English Srila Prabhupada books. So sometimes there were some differences in interpretation and deep understanding. So how to deal with this?
Well, that's something you have to work out between yourselves, isn't it? I mean, among the Russian teachers and the faculty, they have to standardize it all. There shouldn't be a difference in understanding. Teaching Bhakti Shastri means to teach what Srila Prabhupada wants to teach us. Well, it's true, there are differences of outlook on what Srila Prabhupada taught us. There are differences of outlook. Different devotees have different opinions about what Srila Prabhupada taught. Then you have to study very carefully. One thing that I've understood from the English Bhakti Shastri course, I'm not sure if it's there in the Russian, is an avoidance of controversial issues. For instance, early in the Bhagavad Gita as it is, in one of the purports in the first chapter, Srila Prabhupada states that women in general are not very intelligent and they're like children. And there are similar statements which throughout Srila Prabhupada's writings. So, from what I understand in the English teaching of the Bhakti Shastri course, such topics, they're considered controversial and they're not explained, or they may be discussed, but it's left open-ended without giving any conclusion. But to teach Shastra means you should give a conclusion. It means who is teaching, they should understand, and they should be able to present what Srila Prabhupada is stating. If a conclusion is given, it gives the impression that, well, Srila Prabhupada wasn't clear in what he stated, and that one's open to have different opinions as to what Srila Prabhupada means. So that we're supposed to be learning from Shastra about the truth, but this introduces relativism. And actually statements like this, which do appear throughout Srila Prabhupada's books, they're practically taboo to be mentioned in the society of devotees nowadays. So that's one form of interpretation of just avoiding topics that Srila Prabhupada speaks about clearly and repeatedly, because I don't know what is the because. We want to avoid controversy, or we want to be politically correct, or what? There should be a conclusion and a clear understanding given. Otherwise, what did you come? You can just read the books at home. Why did you come if you don't get clarity?
Now, upon completion the Bhakti Shastri course, we were not only able to see certain issues and faults in our own hearts, but also we are able now to recognize such issues in the society in general, in our spiritual society. So how to hold ourselves from actually opening a war against those issues, but actually deal with them properly.
Why should you not mention? You say that now you've studied Shastra more, you can see not only faults within yourself, but faults within the society of devotees. And how can we restrain ourselves from mentioning? Why should you restrain yourself from that? Knowledge gives the power of discrimination, which is essential in spiritual life. As you should learn from studying Srila Prabhupada's books, that it is a duty of the Brahmana to speak what needs to be spoken for the benefit of all, if for the sake of maintaining some peace in society by overlooking different faults within it, then we are also a society of cheaters and the cheated. There is a very strong ethos within our movement at the present time of not recognizing and not deliberately not recognizing that things that should not be are going on. But one is not a Brahmana if he cannot see what should be and what should not be, and cannot discriminate between them, and is not prepared to speak that this should be corrected. Otherwise it becomes something like the Soviet regime. Keep your mouth shut. Mouth shut comes in Russian also. Is it? I thought I heard that.
Well, I was too small at that time.
Interesting.
If a few years ago I've taken Bhakti Shastri, and as a result I had a great inspiration of changing my own spiritual life and pushing on the Srila Prabhupada's movement, but in due course of time, after several years, that enthusiasm diminished. So would you recommend to take the Bhakti Shastri course again to refreshen it?
Yeah, if that You can take the course again if you find it's very useful. Or you can read the books at home. Whatever. Keep our spiritual life alive. That's required. Definitely to study Shastra, Srila Prabhupada's books in the association of enthusiastic devotees who are eager to understand this. Definitely that's going to be very enlivening. Hare Krishna.